What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Tripp. I am here in beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. I'm so glad you decided to join us today for another episode of the Real Estate Investing Live podcast. We interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout this great country. We're on episode number 122. Today is no different. We have a great guest, Mr. Todd Toback. How's it going today, Todd?
I'm doing awesome, Brian. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to get you on the show. I know we've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm excited to have you. We're going to dig into some wholesaling. And for those that don't know who Todd is, Tom Kroll talks about you all the time because you guys are brothers. So we have the brother of Tom Kroll on the show. So Todd, just start off there. Tell everybody who you are for those that don't know who you are and what you do in real estate specifically.
Sure. So my name's Todd Toback. I live in San Diego, California. And I probably got started like many other people listening to the podcast. I read a book. This is back before podcasts even existed. Even before YouTube was a thing. I read a book called Multiple Streams of Income by Robert Allen. Phenomenal book. And I read the whole thing cover to cover. I skipped the network marketing portion of it, but it just got me so pumped up about real estate. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell it once again. I was working a corporate job. I was selling Viagra at the time during the heyday.
Okay.
And it was like a dream job, right? And about a year and a half into it, one of my friends who I brought on was actually brought on a higher salary, right? And I was outperforming him, but just because of the way it came in, he already had a couple of years of experience. I was like, hey, it just kind of spawned this thing that like I wanted to make more money, right? So I went and I spoke to my boss and I was like, hey, I'd really like a raise. I know you just brought on so-and-so and I deserve to be higher. And so he's like, hey, you know what? Like, this is not the way the corporate world works. He's like, I like you, you're a hard worker, but there's this, like a ladder, right? And that's just the way it works. And Pfizer was a really big company at the time. And I was really appreciative of the opportunity. But I was upset. I was embarrassed. I was frustrated. And he was like, hey, there's just a cap. And he's like, am I going to give you what you need? It was a really straightforward question, by the way. And he was one of my original sales mentors, really asked great questions. And one of the guys who said, hey, don't be scared of the answer, right? So I drove home. I was a little upset, a little depressed. I was on the 101 freeway and in Ventura, California. And I remember seeing a Barnes & Noble's bookstore and something said, pull over, right? Across the 3 lanes. I'm crossing over 3 lanes and everyone honking and giving me the finger. Ran into Barnes & Noble's bookstores, picked up Multiple Streams of Income, read the entire thing in one night. And pretty much 30 days later, long story short, I locked up my first real estate deal.
Wow.
And it was, really funny because I was in this hustler mode, right? For many people who are, involved in real estate and they're doing that first deal, you're a hustler, right? You scrape, you claw, you'll do anything. And so I remember going to the county courthouse to find out-of-state owners, right? That's like something that's really popular these days, but they had no list source, no online stuff. I actually had to go into like a paper catalog and I blew dust off this old book, like in that scene from Ghostbusters. I don't know if you remember that, but I brought some, donuts and bagels and then a lady helped me, sent out some letters, hand wrote them, got a deal, made 80 grand, split it with my brother-in-law, made it quick. Each of us made 40 and the rest is history.
That's an incredible story. What year was that, Todd?
I believe that was 2003, maybe 2002.
That's an awesome story. What made you get that book? Like what, obviously, you said something made you, cut across all those lanes of traffic. What magnetized you to that book?
Well, I was, again, I was just like depressed, coming home and I'm like, I'm not going to get to where I want to go. Right. So there's that trigger, right? There's always like a trigger that causes a behavior change, right? Well, whenever we're in a spot where we're not happy, it's like something's like, a switch, right? And I was pissed, and I'm driving home and I'm like, I'm going to figure out a way to get out of corporate America. Because I was living in Santa Barbara at the time, and I was making like $100,000 working for Pfizer. And again, I was really thankful for my boss and my mentor and all that other stuff. But that's basically the poverty line up there, right? So I'm like, I'm never going to be able to buy a house. up here unless I'm making like a, $500,000 a year. And so it was cool because it just opened my eyes. It says, I'm going to have to make a shift. Just like we're going to talk about today. Like if you're in a hustler mode and working and doing deals, there's going to have to be a shift that we'll talk about to realize that what you're doing now will not get you to where you're trying to go, right? What you're doing now will not get you where you're trying to go. And so that was the shift for me, Brian. And so, I mean, and then I walked in the bookstore and there was a great, the cover, is it in here somewhere? Maybe it's at home. But anyway, the cover, drew me to it. Right. And, I don't know, just picked up the book and it spoke to me.
That's an awesome story, man. I definitely want to get into that. I think that's huge. I got some things I want to say about that too. There has to be a shift. I came from the basketball world where one of my former coaches said that people just don't change. You just don't just change. Something has to actually happen to you in order for you to change. So I definitely want to get into that a little bit more. And obviously we're going to dig into some wholesaling too. But before we do, I really want to ask you this because I think it's really interesting. If you listen to Tom Kroll at all, Tom talks a lot about his story. He tells a story, and obviously that's how he got into wholesaling. Is because of you kind of got him into that. And he tells this story that he's on the phone with you and you're calling him a bleepity bleepity bleep and just get out there and just go do it. I want to hear that story from your perspective. Tell the story of how Tom Kroll got started in wholesaling.
Well, this goes back to like something has to happen as a behavior change, right? Because up to this point, right, Tom he was kind of like lethargic and indifferent to real estate, right? And I was telling him about it. I'm like, hey, I'm making great money. And by the way, at this point, like early in the years, I was a solo operator, right? I was a hustler. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sharing this with him and, he did not have that behavior change and he was not interested in, like wholesaling or real estate, right? And so I remember he had sold his company and he was working for the company. And I remember he was kind of exhausting his savings, just kind of sitting there, kind of wondering what to do next. And there was no why until one day, like all the money was gone, right? And he was on the verge of bankruptcy, right? And so that was the shift where it says, oh my gosh, I've got to wake up, right? And this was like, I was already in real estate for 4 years before Tommy made that shift. So at that point, I had transitioned from wholesaler to business owner. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, I was talking business owner to Tom, who then, said, I'm going to come out of being an employee now to a hustler. Right. So that was the shift for him. But again, he had a big why at that point. Right. And we all have I think it really, really takes a defining moment for everybody, right, to want to now make a shift because it's painful. Right. We're in our comfort zone. We have routines. We don't like things to change. Right. And so wherever you are, if you've got a job and now you want to become a hustler and start your own business, right, there's going to be some pain involved. You have to do different things, right? You're going to have to take a phone call at 8:00 when you don't want to, when you're a hustler, right? You're going to have to spend your own money on marketing when you don't want to, right? And so that's scary. And so something has to happen for you to be able to want to do that because when you're at a job, you don't have to spend your own money and you don't have to take a phone call at 8:00 and you automatically get a paycheck, right, every 2 weeks, right? So there's got to be some kind of pain and a big why to do that. And the same thing when you're trying to break out a hustler to a business owner.
I love how you paint that picture because I've never really said it in those words. I love how you say that. Go from employee to hustler and then eventually, hopefully, hustler to business owner. I think, and I want to talk about that.
So let me stop you there for a second, right? So most people say, hopefully, eventually, right? That's the point, right? Is that mostly everyone's like, oh, I wish I could run this like an actual business, right? It's like, no, right? Is that there's got to be a shift, right? And saying, because there's going to be a pain point. There's going to be a pain point in switching to a business owner, right? And it hurts, right? It's like, hey, I wish I could be in better shape. No, you're going to have to go to the gym, right, and lift some weights and stop eating pizza 3 times a week, right? It's like right? And there's a pain point, to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think I understand where Tom tells his story, and he's like, he just tells it to me like it is, and it helped him. But I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this evolution. I think it's critical. I don't want to skip over hustler. It sounds to me like, I know you're not glossing over it, but it does sound like, the whole point is to get the business owner. And I get that. I understand that. But I feel like we can't gloss over hustler. You have to hustle, right?
Well, I'm glad you said that, right? Because you'll see a picture of me, right? There's a lion back there, right? One of the things that's really important is that you can never lose that hustler, right? You've got to be a hustler. And what is a hustler? Well, a hustler is someone who will do whatever it takes to get the job done, right? And they will do stuff. So if you're just starting out and you're generating leads, or you're working with real estate agents, they say, I've got a deal, you've got to move, right? There's got to be a sense of urgency, right? If someone says, hey, I want you to send out 5,000 postcards for your first time, it's like, we don't sit there and look at the postcard for 2 months, right? And the copy, it's like, no, you've got to send it out now and make sure that happens. And you've got to have a hunger and a desire and a will to make this happen, right? When other people say, I can't, I can't do this, or like, it's a perfect example. Like the other day, my daughter had an orthodontist appointment, right? And then my wife called and says, hey, they don't have another appointment available for like the next 4 weeks, right? And I was like, oh, hogwash. And she's like, I just called them. I'm like, So I get on the phone with the lady. I'm like, hey, can you get her in this week? We're traveling. That's not going to work. And she's like, oh, we're really full. And I was like, hey, like, it would really mean a lot to me. We can't get in, before then. Can you see what you can do? Right. And she says, yeah, well, I could squeeze you in between 8 and 8:30 tomorrow. Right. I think it's that extra oomph, right? When most people are kind of just sitting there, not in motion, or when you get this point where most people just see one obstacle, where you're able to move with a sense of urgency and passion and purpose. Now, I want to be very, very, very careful here, because you need that hustler to start a business, right? Or to generate something out of nothing, right? To build a fire, right? You are most of the time, right? If you're sitting there and you're, trying to make a fire, you've got to work hard to be able to do that, right? And that's going to be important, and to have that desire to start a business. Yes. Now, granted, when you switch to business owner, right, that hustler still must be there for you to continue to grow. You can't get fat and lazy, right? You need to hustle in a different way, right? I was talking about this on our Next Level Wholesaling coaching call. Is when you're looking to hire employees, right, or team members, right, you got to hustle like in recruiting, right? Or if something's not working anymore for your team, you've got to like get up and make sure, and you got to put them in a position to win. If you see a problem, you got to like move. They're looking to you at a sense of leadership, right? So it doesn't mean that you need to be there 80 hours a week, right? But if you're there, an hour every 3 days, they want to see that you have this intensity about you, right? That you do what you say that you're going to do, and that you're going to see problems, that you're going to move, and that you're going to act on them and fast and bust through barriers. Or if you don't know the answer to something, you're going to move to find an answer for them. So you cannot lose that hustler. And I think there's been a couple times in my business where you hit this level of success, right? And when you hit that level of success, it is really easy to lose that guy, right? You're really, really, really easy to lose that guy. So you can't lose him, right? Does not mean that you're running around meeting with motivated sellers at 8 o'clock, right? But it means that there's this sense of intensity and this fire inside that you're going to have to keep burning, to keep growing at least.
So kind of two questions here, kind of steering off on two separate paths, still talking about that hustler. The most pressing question is, how do you not lose that? Because I think that, I'm just kind of asking for myself, because that's what you just said, is it's very easy to, once you establish some sort of level of success, you may not have gotten all the way there, but some sort of level of success, it's pretty easy to lose at least a little bit of that edge.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So I go through a couple of practices now that really helped me. And so I learned this actually from Dan Sullivan in two things. Number one is that you're always setting new goals, right? You're always setting new goals and new capabilities to get you out of your comfort zone, right? And so if you're like, hey, I just want to double what I did this year. Well, it doesn't require new ways of thinking, right? It doesn't require new ways of meaning. You're just like, oh, well, I just have to do more of what I'm already doing, right? Well, and I know the term 10X is totally overused, right? But Dan Sullivan uses it differently than what's out there. In that, if you're going to try to do 10 times what you're doing now, it's going to take a totally different paradigm shift, right? Totally different paradigm shift of what you're doing now. It's a new set of activities, right? So let's say right now I'm selling hot dogs on the side of the street, right? And I say, hey, I want to do 10 times what I'm doing right now. I can't be the one selling hot dogs, right? I can't show up here at 6 a.m. and sell hot dogs till noon or midnight, because that won't work, right? That's not going to get me there, and that's a losing battle. Does that make sense? Right? So now I might say, okay, well, to do that, I'm going to have to license my hot dog stand, right? And sell this licensed hot dog stand to 3,000 people across the United States who want to license my system, right? And so that new, fresh, exciting perspective, right, will light a fire in you, right? It's something new and exciting, right? Because you have to give a capability that you did not have, right? You now need a completely new capability versus just selling hot dogs on the side of the road. That's the first thing. The second thing, let me say this, unless you want to comment in between there.
Yeah, I want to comment. Don't lose your second thing. I want to comment on that, because I think that's where I think a lot of people get tripped up, is what you just said, is, we're always told to focus on one thing and be great at one thing. And then now all of a sudden we're going to launch licensed hot dog stands all over the country. We just want our one to be perfect. Don't we need to make that? Are you assuming that thing's already perfect and we're good to go and we're ready to launch a second and third one? Do you understand the question?
Well, I understand that. I think that's what you're talking about is false thinking, right? In that
okay.
Not false thinking in terms of the hot dog stands are your one thing, right? So hot dog stands is your one thing. So if you have your hot dog stands, right, and you want to expand, right, and I'm not saying going to 10,000 is the right move. I'm just saying you need a new shift, right? Mm-hmm. And so that one stand is saying, okay, well, hustling is not going to get me where I need to go, right? It could be I'm going to hire this one guy to run my hot dog stand.
Understand.
And by the way, it's probably not perfect because you're the one doing it, right? It's so crazy. Like a lot of people think I want to do things the right way, and so I do them, right? But what happens is they hit this critical point where all of a sudden they're working too much, right? And once you're working too much, quality actually goes down. Right. So we have I talk to a lot of wholesalers over there and they're like, oh, my cash flow is tight. I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, well, I'm just not doing enough deals. I'm like, I can't hire an acquisition manager. I can't hire somebody. I'm like, let me ask you something. Are you getting back to your leads fast enough? Well, no, I'm totally overwhelmed. Are you following up properly? Oh, I'm totally overwhelmed. So let me get this straight. You think the acquisition manager is the one that's going to cost you money. I'm like, you're the one who's going to cost you money because you're stressing yourself out. You're doing too much work, mm-hmm. right? And so when you feel like you're at this point where you're like, this is about as far as I can go, right? It's not an option. You must bring people along for the journey if you're going to expand, right? If you're going to expand, you must. So when you say that, I don't think that if you're building, your vision is to build 10,000 hot dog stands. I don't think you now should all of a sudden go open up a cotton candy shop, right? I think that's a distraction, right?
I think where a lot of people get tripped up is the win. like when, like how far into my hot dog stand, to continue with her analogy, how far into building this thing is it now time for me to start expanding? I hear, to actually like put this to wholesaling. I hear a lot of other people say, I'm going to go into this market now in this market because I've got this one figured out. But I've heard from some people saying, well, we went into that market over there and then my business over here suffered.
Yeah. Well, there's two issues we're talking about, right? Is that, first of all, what got you here will not get you there. And this is what I'm talking about, is that you need a new set of capabilities. So people say, I'm going to go into a new market, but they're still in hustler mode, right? So they will not do the things that are now going to shift their results. So people are like, I'm going to, and this used to be me, right? I'm going to send out a bunch of postcards in Oklahoma City, and I'm going to send a bunch of postcards at Cleveland. You know what? And all together, we're just answering these things and shooting out contracts and figuring out how to sell them as we go, right? And they're taking one garbage show of a business, right? And then creating another garbage show, right? Do you know what I mean by that? Right?
So what you're saying is the first business is not humming along like it should, and we're replicating something that's not even sustainable.
Right. So I'm going to now bring us in, right? You're like, okay, Tal, well, when is that right time? Okay. The right time to start working on that is now, is right now. But, okay, if your cash flow is an issue, you've still got to hustle, right? You've got to hustle, but now you need to start making the moves that do not seem urgent, that will get you to where you want to go. So all the moves that you need to now become business owner, and Covey talks about this in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? You need to work on the important, but the not urgent, right? So you tell me, right? Have you done a little bit of wholesaling?
Yeah.
Okay. What does everybody think is urgent and important in their wholesaling business?
Marketing,
right? But, well, ironically, they not even, right? They're like the phone calls come in, got to run, answer the phone calls, meet with a motivated seller. I'm going to lock it up. Bam, 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 bam. Right. They talk and act like that way. Right.
Some, yeah.
Right. But how many sit there once a quarter and say, hey, you know what? This is going to be what our marketing is for the next quarter. And I'd like this to go out every Thursday, 5,000 pieces. I'm going to put it on an Excel spreadsheet. To do this, it's going to take about an hour. Yep. Right. But for the next 16 weeks, this is going to be planned and out, and I'm not going to have to touch it. Our wonderful marketing assistant, who happens to reside in the Philippines, who understands us and understands our end goal is to generate 20 phone calls a week for our team, right? Make sure this goes out every Thursday without my involvement. How many people think do that?
Very few.
Very few.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Because what mode are they in?
They're in hustler mode.
Hustler mode. They're in hustler mode, right? So they won't slow down for a moment to do these key, important, but not urgent things, right? When they realize if they just did these few things, and by the way, these things that I'm talking about are so easy to do. They are so easy to do, but like there's a book called The Slight Edge, right? He says they're also easy not to do. Right? So some of these things that we talk about now in Next Level Wholesaling are what we call lion habits, right? Where they're really, really, really just a set of disciplines, right? That if you do them, will set you free. Okay, Jocko Willing says discipline, right, equals freedom, right? So you're like, okay, I've got to be in hustler mode. When's the time? Well, I would start right now, right? So I would take 4 hours a week, block them off my calendar today. I'd say, and I don't know if I'm getting too granular here, but I'll get a little granular just to give you an example. Okay. I'm going to plan my marketing right now for the quarter, right? And I'm going to put this on my calendar for 2 hours on Monday. Okay. Most people don't know if they're making money or losing money, by the way. They don't meet with the bookkeeper. They don't have a conversation. They're just kind of like, there's more money in the bank account in this this month, right?
Totally.
And why don't they do that? Because it's important, but it's not urgent, right? Well, okay, I would make an appointment to meet with your bookkeeper and your CPA once a month on the fourth Tuesday of every month, whatever you want to do, right? And put that on there, and then get your P&Ls from the prior month. By the way, those aren't going to be perfect the first time you do it, right? But now you have this discipline, right? People are like, okay, well, how do I hire an acquisition manager? Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to put an ad out today to find somebody, and then wind up hiring somebody and it doesn't work out, right? Meanwhile, one of those disciplines is like always be recruiting, right? So, well, how do I recruit? Like, is this going to take a bunch of time? No, right? Make sure that, A, you've always got an ad running, right? 2 is that maybe you've got some Facebook Lives that you're going to do for your business in your local market, right? Every Thursday of every week, right? And make that a discipline, right? And over time, you can see that it's like there's no big shifts in this business. Everything I'm talking about is so easy to do, right? They're so easy to do, but they're these little disciplines, little habits that when you put them in will drastically multiply, okay? And compound off of each other. But it's the stuff that people aren't doing because it's not sexy. It's like not the results they want right now.
Totally. So I wrote down 3. I want you to can you give us the lion habits?
I'll give you a few. There's a bunch.
Right? I wrote down 3. Tell me if I got these right.
Okay, go ahead.
I wrote down.
Because by the way, these lion habits, are, there's a lot of them in business, but a lot of them are personal too. But go ahead.
Gotcha. No. And I think this is awesome. Todd, we've talked so much about wholesaling on this podcast, but we've never talked about next level wholesaling. So I love the conversation we're having, and we're going to give you a chance to talk about what next level wholesaling actually is here in a minute. But here's what I got. You got to always be recruiting, which is what you just said. Is that a lion habit, or is that just something?
That's the lion habit. Yeah.
Okay. That's a lion habit. Set up your marketing for the quarter.
Uh-huh.
Do it one time, and you don't even have to think about it the rest of the quarter.
That's right.
That's a lion habit.
That's a lion habit.
And then we got to meet with our bookkeeper and do a P&L every single month. Is that a lion habit?
A P&L is like, oh my gosh, how when you get in front of the mirror, right, and take a picture of yourself in front of the mirror, and you're not where you want to be, right, or you get your body fat test, you just can't lie. You know what I'm saying? It's like getting naked in front of the mirror and taking a picture. Okay. And a P&L, okay, is just like that. Okay. So hustlers don't have P&Ls. True. Right?
Very true.
You've got to understand this because, so lion habit is a P&L. Okay. And that's the business side, by the way. Yes.
Let me touch on that too. And tell me if you agree or disagree. I kind of asked this question earlier, but I want to ask it a little bit differently now. That it's okay to be a hustler. Like, it's totally okay to be a hustler, and it's okay not to have all these lion habits necessarily in the very beginning, because I think hustle is so important in the beginning, but we should always be moving towards becoming a lion and having these lion habits. Is true or false?
Well, look, the purpose of these podcasts, I think, is to teach people to not make our same mistakes, right? Like, or the reason why anyone listens to a podcast or buys, coaching is like, hey, I don't want to go through your 12 years of pain, right?
Totally.
Right. So I want to listen to you. So people are like, well, should I look at my P&L every month? Personally, I think that you should do that starting now, right? Did I do it? No, I didn't even do it for the first 8 years in business, right? And so because of this, right, and believe me, I know someone is relating to this, you then start to make decisions out of emotion and fear and gut feelings and what other people are talking about on Facebook, right, and get distracted versus what's really going on in your own business.
Totally.
Right? And so, you got to see what is making money and what's not. right? And so one of the things that we do even the first week with our next level wholesaling students, and I'm sorry I keep bringing this up, but we make people take all of the marketing that they're doing and they've done over the entire year and actually measure it. And within the first week, you'll see most people shave off 80% of their marketing budget.
Wow.
Right? Just because they didn't take that time to take a look. And everyone's like, track my numbers. And they're like, well, what does that mean? Right? Like, are you actually taking time, shutting off your phone, shutting off the computer and looking at this Excel spreadsheet in front of you and saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Right? Yeah. This is what we're doing. And it gives you this sigh of relief and confidence that you can now move forward, right? And be a business owner. And one of the things people say, well, you were a wholesaler. No, I'm not a wholesaler. I'm not a wholesaler, right? I own a business that happens to turn contracts for a living, right? Otherwise known as wholesaling. So always be recruiting. Well, here's what I can tell you is that the new world, right, is going to be based on social media, whether you like it or not, right? Is people are spending 95% of their time, it seems like, on social media. So should I start to be posting what I'm doing on my brand on social media? I think you should start that now, right? I think you should start that now, right? Because it's what you do today, you're not going to see the results of today, right? It's going to, what you are doing, what the results that you're getting today are the results of what has happened in the past. So True. I don't know if you can see what's on my wall here, but I've got 3 things. Okay. You'll see a locomotive. You'll see one of those. Yeah. You'll see one of those old school water pumps. Okay. And then at the end there, you'll see a rocket ship. Okay. Do you see that at the end there?
I do. The Big Mo.
The Big Mo. Okay.
Momentum.
And, the Big Mo is John Maxwell talks about that, but Darren Hardy also talks about that in the compound effect. And so whenever we hire a new acquisition specialist in our company, I'm like, look, at the beginning, let's use the water pump example. You're going to be, pumping this water. You're pumping and pumping. You're like, oh, man, nothing is coming out. And I'm working so hard and my heart rate is up. And you're like, what the heck? Right? And then finally, like maybe 60 to 90 days later, right? What's happening?
Water's finally coming out of the water pump.
Well, slow down there, right? How much water?
Doesn't it like spit like in the beginning?
Just like a little trickle.
Yeah.
Right. So when most people, this is the problem. Most people, they see the little trickle. They're like, man, I'm working so hard, or I'm going to the gym, or I'm, doing this project and I'm only seeing this little tiny sprinkle of results, right? Or that train, it's working so hard and it's moving, but a little bit, right? What do?
Quit.
They quit because like, I'm not working this, right? Meanwhile, if they just kept that momentum going, because everyone knows that a train moves really freaking fast and a rocket ship moves really fast. And that water pump, that water shoots out, but we all quit in this beginning 30, 60, 90 day cycle, right? And so if you want those results, you've got to start now.
Yeah.
You've got to start now. So if you want to start hiring people, build your brand. I can tell you this, the job ad thing, you can put job ads out and that's fine. And you might be able to find some people. But my best people have come from referrals and my personal brand, right? About who I was. And I'd start that today.
Yeah.
One other thing, and I'm really passionate about this. You need to hire people before you're ready.
How? How do we do that?
Well, number one, you got to commit to it.
Right.
Right. You've got to commit to it.
That's difficult for a lot of people who you mentioned earlier are having cash flow issues. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that?
Well, so let me tell you 2 stories. Okay. My first 2 hires in business. Okay. My first 2 hires in business. And it's funny because false confidence, like if you can give yourself confidence, even when you shouldn't, right? That's usually a good thing, right? Because you're going to do stuff that other people won't. So back in like 2010, and by the way, I recorded a video about this. You can see it on the Lion Pride Facebook page. I recorded a video on this on Friday. Is back in 2010, the market, just started to crash, right? And in 2009, I was just kind of feeling bad for myself, and I didn't really do anything. I should have been hustling, right? But I was just kind of feeling bad for myself. But in 2010, I was doing like owner finances and lease options and leasing and subleasing and making a bunch of little stuff to make money. And I was hustling. And that was that critical shift for me, right? I woke up and I was in bed with my wife, and she was really angry with me because the night before she was like, Todd, you're working too much. And we weren't even making that much money, but I was just moving and shaking. And I was like, I don't want to go to work today. But I had my own company, right? That was my shift. And so I hired a consultant coach, and he was like, hey, you've got to find something repeatable that you can hire someone else to do. Mm-hmm. And so I took a look at it, and I just decided on wholesaling. It could have been anything. It could have been hot dogs, right? Could have been hot dogs. And I just made the decision. So I started putting feelers out there. I started talking. I started recording some YouTube videos, right? Like now YouTube was like starting to be a thing, right? So, and I got a referral from a friend, and his name was Brian. Now here's the crazy thing. I was in a small office space. I might as well have been in my home office, by the way. I probably would have been better off in my home office, Brian. In a really bad part of San Diego, 400 square feet, I was paying $275 a month for my office space, right? Totally outdated, and in the back of the office building, there was a guy back there homeless guy who would throw up every day. He would drink, and you used to hear him dry heave, right? So I was like, are you ready to hire somebody? So most people would say, Todd, you were not ready to hire somebody, right? Does that make sense? Right? So Brian comes in, and I'm just trying to paint a picture of what, my office situation looked like. It was cool. I was like 29, right? 28. And so Brian comes in, shows up his first day of work, but I had enthusiasm, right? And excitement. And I had a vision of where I wanted to go. Right. So he came in, and all these things weren't there. Right. And so we took the table, and this is a picnic table I had from Costco, and we unfolded it, and Brian put his stuff on here, and there's a barbecue stain on the table. Right. And so Brian was like, okay, like whatever. I was like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And, we got it. We cleaned it off, and we sat down. I was like, we're going to crush it. And I gave him the vision, and I hired him on 100% commission, no base salary. Right? No hourly wage, no guarantee of success, right? But I said, we're going to do this together, right? I sent out some mailers, calls came in. I worked with them. We role played back and forth. We made a ton of mistakes, right? I wasn't flush with cash, right? But I had enough money just to send out those mailers, right? 5-6 weeks later, we locked up that first deal together. We went out to the house. It was 103 degrees inside this dark house with no electricity, no air conditioning. It was like a $40-something thousand wholesale deal. It was phenomenal. Brian got paid. I got paid back my marketing. I made a profit. Okay, that was pretty much the last time I ever locked up a house.
It's good stuff.
Right? And so I want to tell you, you can be ready. I'll tell you about my second hire before we go, because are you ready? Well, it was funny because I was committed at that point. I'm like, I am never going back. Right? I am never going back to this. So we started doing deals. I wanted to do deals with agents. I had never done a deal with a real estate agent before. Right? I knew about another guy in my town doing it. His name was Brock Kelly. He was one of our buyers. He told me what he was doing. I hired somebody, and same thing. I gave him the vision. I coached him. I trained him. His name was Noah. Right? That 1 year we made about $500,000 just working off of Noah. Now here's the truth. If you guys are listening to this, am I ready? I can tell you that second book of business, working with real estate agents, I would have never done. I would have never been able to do because I didn't have the bandwidth. I wasn't ready, but I made the commitment that I wanted to add this book of business, and I wasn't going to do it on my own. So we brought in Noah.
It's awesome stuff. It's great analogies. Great visuals. I did the same thing in my wholesale business. I did the same thing, 100% commission, gave them the vision. I think that that's the way to go for sure. But I hear that from a lot of people. I can't afford to make a hire. So what do? I think that that's a great tip. Todd, I want to shift for just a second. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. I want to shift. You have dropped so many names of books and authors and quotes just in this 30 minutes that we've been talking. Talk about the power of reading. I know you're such a voracious reader. Talk about the power of reading, and if someone, maybe they feel like they hate to read or don't like to read, how can, just talk about the importance of it, why we should be doing it.
Well, let me, now again, talk about line habits, right? Because this is part of this, right? Is it okay if I bring this back to that?
Yeah.
Right. Look, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, I don't like to read.
Yep.
Bro, some people just aren't going to be aligned, right? And what I mean by that, is they're going to get eaten, right? I've got something that we call 90-day goals, right? I said some people are going to be your 90-day prey, okay?
So do I hear what you're saying correctly? If we don't read, we're going to get eaten? Is that what you're saying?
You're going to get eaten alive, right?
Wow.
Well, here's my point, is that you can try to learn on your own, right? But two things are going to happen. First of all, like 90% of the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, like people are going to be like, oh man, amazing. Oh, this is great, blah, blah. But it's going to be forgotten in a day.
Yeah.
Right. And so audio is great because you're listening to this. You might be jogging right now. You might be in your car. Maybe you're in your gym, but you're not fully engaged. By the way, I appreciate you listening. I'm sure, Brian, you appreciate everybody listening, but you're not fully engaged.
True.
So one thing that I do is I'm up no later than 5 every morning, right? I mean, there are some exceptions to that if, like we're out really late or something like that. But I have a routine of which I'm up no later than 5, right? Preferably 4:30. And so my daily practice is to be up that early. I do this not because there's any bragging rights to it, right? But in the stage of my life, now you have to start thinking ahead. So I have 4 kids. The only time that I have to myself, right, is that 4:30 to 6:30 window.
Yep.
Right? That's just me time. So for me, I get up. I have a routine that I go through. Okay, but since you asked me about reading, okay, the 4th step in my routine is reading, right, and journaling about that, right, and then I try to teach that in some way to a member of my team, right, or
every day,
family, every day, Monday through Friday. Okay. Now the reason why we teach, right, is because now you learn.
Yep.
Right. You learn.
Totally.
And so I'll read a book, and I'm constantly teaching others on my team about it. I hear an idea, I'll teach, and now it's ingrained.
Yep.
Right. So that's a 4th part of that. Right. And so everyone's like, I don't have time to train or do my team. Like it only takes like 15 minutes. Right. So they or really 2. Right. So these are part of the stuff that really, really compounds over time. Right. Reading is great. But part of that too, there has to be a target that you have to have now that you're implementing this stuff.
Yeah. That's awesome stuff. I went all year last year, 2018, fighting the fact that I couldn't read anymore because I needed glasses, and I kept fighting it like an idiot, and finally went and got some readers, and now I'm like reading like crazy again. And I have a literature degree, by the way. So reading is critical, and I tell people all the time there's a huge difference between listening to an audiobook and actually like reading. And then what you just said, journaling, I do the exact same thing, and I teach it. I do everything you just said, because when we're doing those things, we retain it so much better. And I love it, man. I think that's incredible. If you guys aren't reading out there, get to it. 10 pages a day at minimum. Just hit it. Todd, give us 1, 2, 3 book recommendations, some stuff that maybe you're reading right now, or maybe some stuff that had a really big impact on you that maybe we should be reading.
Well, one is The Slight Edge. I mean, Jeff Olson, you read that book. There's a couple of books like The Compound Effect is you don't really read both of those, but Slight Edge I read recently, and it just reinforces the stuff that I'm talking about. Every day, the decisions that you make, they compound. So that's going to be really, really, really important. Let me think in terms of like the must reads. You know what? I'm going to throw The Compound Effect in there too. Yeah, both of those are huge. And then the third one that I'm reading right now, if you're trying to execute anything in your business, is going to be 4DX, the 4 disciplines of execution. That's going to be, that one's not getting a lot of press these days. You know, I think those are the 3 that I'll give you.
Awesome.
And well, so let me talk about 2 seconds about 4DX, which I love, right? Is everyone wants like the big sexy move, right? The big sexy move inside their business, right? Or they want to, you know, measure rev. Well, 4DX, 4 disciplines of execution, is a lot about some of these habits where you measure the lead measures, right? So what are the stuff that's going to produce the results that you want? So if you have a wholesale business, you're like, okay, I want to generate 30 phone calls a week. Well, no, it's not 30 phone calls a week, right? It's, you know, how many postcards did you send out 90 days ago?
Totally.
Right. And so it's going to force you to do that. So 4DX is phenomenal. I'm looking at my, my shelf here. Those are probably the 3. Brian Tracy's got a good book called No Excuses. I love that one too. I've read that one 3 times. So yeah, those are the top 3. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. And we have a little book club that we've been doing, reading a book every other week in our Facebook group. And the Compound Effect is coming up here in a few weeks. We're going to read that together. And I haven't read it yet. I just got it.
Okay.
So I'm excited.
I mean, that's a 2-day read. I mean, if you get real excited about it, I mean, you know, if people really just understand that concept, it's completely life-changing.
How much should we be reading, Todd? Seriously, like we want to be a lion. How much should we be reading? Like how many pages a day? How
what
many
do you think?
hours?
See, here's the crazy thing. What do you think I'm going to say?
I think you're probably going to say we're all different and we should kind of pick something that fits our personality. I don't know.
I think you should read 15 minutes a day. That's it. Here's my point, is that you got to make a habit out of it.
Yes.
Right. So right now it is harder. Right. So like my morning routine that I do, I've got a series of 5 or 6 things that I do. Right. It is harder for me now not to do it than to do it. Yeah. If I leave the house without doing it, I'm completely irritated.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, if I don't get my reading in, I'm, you know, just kind of messed up for the day.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not work for me. So the beauty about any of these, right. So you know, like some of the line habits that I have in my life, sometimes people are like, I don't want to do that every single morning. I'm like, well, once habit kicks in, it's easier to do it than not to do it. So a lot of people put all this pressure on themselves, like, I've got to work out for 2 hours a day, and I've got to read for an hour a day, and I've got to invest in the relationship with my family, and I've got to do all this stuff. And it's overwhelming because they're trying to add all these new habits because it's work. Right. But you only need, they talk about in The One Thing with Gary Keller, another book. Sorry, I'm throwing in a lot here, but is you only need self-discipline long enough for a habit to kick in.
Yeah.
So if you just add one of these things, right, and then you do that for like a month, and then you add another one, and then another one every single month. At the end of the year, you're going to have 12 new habits that over a 5-year period, you will be an absolute beast. Right?
A lion.
Well, yes, a lion. You're going to be a lion. Okay. And so yeah. I mean, I can't overemphasize the impact of a daily routine. But then the understanding that it does not have to be hard. Everything I'm talking about is really, really, really easy.
Yep.
Planning your marketing, meeting with your bookkeeper, constantly recruiting, all that stuff is so easy. But if I have to think about, oh my gosh, I've got to go hire an acquisition specialist and go through that process once, right, and do it all at once, it's arduous and painful.
I agree. It's awesome stuff. Todd, before we go, tell everybody what Next Level Wholesaling is. I've heard incredible things about it.
Well, the first thing that I would say is that it's not for everybody, right? Is that there are some people who want to remain hustlers, right? So these are, if you want to remain a hustler, and some people just can't let that go, they want to stay in that shift and they just want to be a one-man show, and they've made that decision. This is not for them. Okay, absolutely not for them. We work with people who want to own a wholesale business, and they understand that this business is not them. It does not define them, right? The purpose of this business is to generate money every single month right, to live the lifestyle of their dreams, okay? And then 2, okay, invest in cash flowing or appreciating assets, okay? Hopefully a combination of those 2, right? So you have to, number 1, be committed to that idea. So Next Level Wholesaling teaches you to, number 1, do some of those line habits, get them in your business. We focus on that in the first month. And then in month 2, we focus then on bringing on that acquisition specialist to now remove yourself from that business, right? And that's what it's about. Number 3, though, environment is everything. Environment is everything. So if you're around a bunch of hustlers and you're listening to this, you're going to stay a hustler, right? But if you're around people who have a different mindset than you, and you want to now become a business owner, you must be around business owners. If you go to any real estate investing event, you will see the people doing over $1 million a year are hanging out in one part. All the people who've never done a deal are hanging out in the other part of the room. And then kind of like the hustlers going deal to deal, they all hang out. I mean, it's like clockwork, right? You'll see the lunches, the dinners, everything. They all kind of congregate together. So the biggest thing is that I created that community, right? I said, hey, you know what? Everyone here is going to be a lion or want to be a lion, right? And so it's everybody there is they're business owners or quickly approaching business ownership, right? And that's the powerful thing is the environment, right? Is that you want to be around other lions.
For sure. How can people get more information about that?
Well, the easiest way to connect with us is check out the Lion Pride Real Estate Investing Facebook page. So if you just type in Todd Toback, Lion Pride Real Estate Investing, you'll see that Facebook page. We're releasing videos there every 3 times a week now, by the way. Lion habit, right? You always want to be getting out in social media. I can't tell you how important that is. So you can reach out there. And yeah, just check us out on Facebook. That's the best place to reach
and
us.
Todd, didn't you had a podcast for a long time? You're not still doing that?
No, the funny thing is that right now we're focusing on one channel, right? This actually goes back to part of that, right? Is that our old podcast, No Limits Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you guys want to go check that out, a lot of that is focused on hustling, right? It's really, really, really focusing on hustling. And so this is the beauty. By the way, there's some great episodes on there, guys. It's archived. It's still up there. Right. And you can go listen to a lot of the old Todd Toback, but sometimes you have to let the old you die to really find the new you. Right. And so, we're going to be relaunching a new podcast here, and that's our plan for probably Q2 of this year, but it's not going to be the same thing. Right. Obviously we talk about, where we're going and, the lions and you have to sometimes let go of your past to find your future.
Totally. Todd, before we go, can I tell a story? Quick story.
It depends what it is.
It's about you, about Asheville, North Carolina last year.
Sure, go for it.
So I'm flying into Asheville, speak at the wholesaling conference. Todd's flying into Asheville. I get off the plane. I had a late night. I know that you probably did too, because you're jumping many time zones. And I'm like half asleep. Somebody taps me on the back of my shoulder and says, "Hey, what's up, man?" I kind of glance over. I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And we talk for a full 5 minutes. And I finally look over at this guy and I say, "Tell me your name again, man. I'm sorry." And you're like looking at me like I'm a complete idiot. You're like, "No, it's Todd Toback." And I just could not have been more embarrassed in my entire life. But that's my embarrassing Todd Toback story right there.
Well, I think it's funny. I think we have to be careful the way that we take things, because I wasn't even thinking that at all. Because I don't think we'd met we never met in person.
No, we had not. But I still knew obviously I knew who you were and I knew what you looked like. I just didn't do the double take that I should have done.
Okay. The red eye can do that to you.
Yeah. Well, Todd, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, being a good sport, and giving us some incredible insight. Guys, go check out Todd's Facebook page. I've seen some stuff you've posted in Wholesaling Inc. I haven't even seen your Facebook page. So dumb me. We're going to link all that up. And Todd, you totally put our show notes people, you're putting them to the test this week, because we link up anything that's mentioned. And I think you mentioned about 25 books. So we're really going to put them to the test this week. So, but we really do appreciate you coming on the show and just giving us some incredible tips on how to get to the next level, get out of hustler mode and get to lion beast mode. We really do appreciate you, Todd.
All right. Thank you, my man. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Hey, hit that subscribe button. We love you so much. We'll see you next week.